Welcome to Torchlight's Exceptional Parenting Podcast, where we talk with the nation's top experts about today's toughest parenting challenges. Whether you're concerned about your child's development, learning, behavior, or you just want to make family time more enjoyable, we share the practical solutions and tools that can help.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Torchlight's Exceptional Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Stefanie Boucher, and I am really excited about our show today because we are going to be talking about something that I believe is quite possibly one of the most useful life skills that a person can have. And no, we're not talking about how to help your kid get homework done on time or how to do their own laundry or pay their bills, which of course are all very important things and you should definitely teach those skills too. Instead, we are going to talk about the art of conflict resolution. Solving problems and disagreements that come up between your child and another person. This, of course, is a skill that we all have to use repeatedly, sometimes on a daily basis. And if you're not good at it, you're going to have a really tough time in all other areas of your life. So if you are having conflicts with your child and you want to know how to begin resolving them, or if your teen or young adult child is transitioning into adulthood and is having trouble interacting with you or with his or her peers, or if you just want a sort of crash course in conflict resolution, then this is the show for you. I'm here today with Stacey Harris, JD, who is the Associate Director of Disability and Access Services at Boston University. And by nature of her position, working with teens and young adults and their parents, is continually working to help people through their biggest life challenges, emotional turmoil, and interpersonal disputes. It's become rather an important specialty for her. So welcome, Stacey, to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I am so happy to have you here today. Let's start by just maybe talking about some of the most common conflicts that you see between young people and their families. I think family conflicts might be a great place to start.
Sure. And I definitely think we can look at the spectrum of age, starting kind of younger to older. But I think first we should talk about conflict. You know, conflict is inherent in all that we do between kids on the playground and at home, and kind of it's really about power and control. So, you know, as we see students at home, it's really about core themes. My parents don't understand. They're being unfair. You know, I think back to my own teenagers. What are the things we hear all the time? You only care about yourself. And these things happen when people are stressed and positional, right? Those are the conflicts. I don't want to go to bed. I want to play my video games. And those skills aren't there yet in the front of the brain of an adolescent, right? They don't know how to resolve conflict. So, you know, our hope is that conflict resolution skills can start young. And if they can't, we work on them in detail when they get to the college level.
What are the most common complaints that you hear that, you know, young people have about their parents? I mean, are you guys working on, like, do you guys have kids coming to you saying that they're having problems with their families, or like what kinds of interventions do you guys work on?
Right. So we see students before they get to college. And what we find is they come into our offices and there probably hasn't been So there's not an agreement between parent and child or guardian and child about what they're going to talk about and who's going to talk about it. So there's this immediate power dynamic. You told them too much. I didn't want them to know that. I don't know how to speak for myself. I don't want you to speak for me. That's all first. And what we see where it comes from, our parents are afraid, right? Your kid is leaving home. You're not going to have control over the situation. So the parent is kind of acting in an emotional place and trying to control everything. The kid is leaving home and is panicking, not wanting to make a bad impression. They don't want us to know their secrets. So everyone is digging their heels in. What we know about conflict is that it's people who are stuck, usually in the past. Even young, you always did things a certain way, so I'm going to kind of anticipate you're going to do it that way again. So when people are stuck, they can't negotiate. They can't think clearly about how to get to a good resolution. So that's what we see, not just with parents, but with peers.
Right. How does that affect the child's, I would imagine that the conflict resolution skills that a child learns at home, and this types of stuff they're going through with their families kind of affects the way they enter into the world and how they then resolve conflicts or attempt to with peers, with teachers, with people they interact with in the world.
Oh,
how in your experience, does the family situation mirror what's going on out in the world?
Sure. I mean, everything we do as parents is in the hopes that we're helping our children grow up to be successful adults. But at the same time, we do this funny thing where we control everything that they do, and we try to guide them on different paths that we want them to be on. And so if I could have, if I had a magic wand and I could teach all families a little bit of mindfulness and empathy and effective listening at a younger age, these young people will grow up and be able to resolve conflicts. So it's kind of, how do we do that when people are teenagers, tweens, before college? And, I would say the first thing is that the idea of mediation and conflict resolution is about everyone being okay with the resolution, right? So if you think of typical parent dynamic, I want you to eat your broccoli, right? We're talking about a little person. Kid doesn't want to eat it. Parents want them to eat it. Everyone's positional, nothing in the middle. There's nowhere to go from there. But if we zoom out on that really simple example and say, you know what? Tell me why you don't like broccoli. I feel it's important to me that you eat some healthy things. There's more room in there to negotiate a common place where maybe everyone gets a little bit of what they want. It's really hard to do that. But there's kind of some core principles around how to handle conflict that can help parents and young people through those conversations. You mind if I run through some of kind of the basic things to keep in mind?
Yes, I would love that.
Great. So some basic rules for parents, and we're going to teach these to young people as well, is you can't have a conversation when you're elevated, right? Really hard to say, sure, I would love to eat broccoli when I am 10 and throwing a tantrum. It doesn't work. So that said, it's okay to be mad. It's okay for people to vent. That's human. And I think as parents, we often say that we want our children in control and to not be angry, but that's part of life. So letting people say how they feel and everyone agreeing that when we're upset, none of us are in the right place to make good choices. That's a really important piece.
What is the right thing to do then if you're in the heat of the moment and you're maybe too angry or too upset or too emotional to make those good choices? What's the next step?
Right. It depends on where you are in the learning process, right? So we hope that these skills can be taught kind of every day, every week, every year so that you're building on them. So if day one you learn a new skill and your child is caught off guard, it's not going to work. Right? It's going to fall flat. So rule number one is be transparent in a calm moment to tell your child you're going to do something different, right? Or else they're going to say, whoa, what's going on? So I would say you say to your child ahead of time, you know what? I find when we're arguing and we're both upset, it doesn't work, right? So now you're teaching the skill of you're never going to be able to resolve things when you're elevated. So that's a great lesson. Say next time we're all upset, one of us or both of us should say, let's take some time away. Let's take 10 minutes or let's agree on how much time we're going to take away and we'll each do things that make us feel better. Maybe you'll listen to music and I'll draw a picture, but we're going to go chill elsewhere, but can we agree to come back? So that has to happen in a calm moment. And it's a great thing to talk about at the dinner table, right? We're all calm. Right. We're all not eating broccoli. We're all getting along. And hey, here's this idea I have because none of us like conflict, right? So you put that out there. And then when the conflict hits, nope, I want 15 more minutes playing my video game. You say, you know what? Let's pause on everything. Let's take a break and then let's come back. Right? We all wish we could do that with our bosses and peers and colleagues. So this works for adults too. So I would say that's the first piece. And the second piece I would say that's super important is effective listening is a skill I think as Americans we don't have. In other cultures, people might be used to sitting back and listening. Not so something that I see in our children. So that's, I would say, the next skill. And to bring this into the house, you can do some fun activities to teach effective listening. So, for example, I have this exercise that's called 90-second listening. Well, we'll start with a 60-second one. If you're at the dinner table, let's say there's 4 people. You want one person to talk and one person to listen for 60 seconds. And the rules are you can't interrupt. You can't make a sound, right? You just talk about your favorite vacation for 60 seconds. It's hard to not interrupt.
It's really hard. Yeah.
Right? Really, really hard. Because normally someone says, oh, my favorite vacation, I went to Mexico. And someone says, oh my God, I went there too. And then it's about you. And that person didn't get to talk. It's a great skill. And then you can say to them, how did you know that mom or guardian or dad or sibling, how did you know I was listening to you? And your child might say, you looked at me in the eyes, or you nodded your head, or you made a gesture with your hands that made me feel like you heard me. Super important. And then you switch, right? Still a light topic. And you do it to the other person. Oh yeah, you looked at me, so I looked at you. So we're building, isn't it amazing? It's hard to give 60 seconds to someone without interrupting. But then
it is amazing. It shouldn't be hard.
It shouldn't be hard. And then if they're a little older and ready for it, you can say, now we're going to try 90 seconds, but we're going to talk about something harder. Like, let's talk about something that you're struggling with. It could be tying your shoe, homework, someone they're dating. It's whatever they want. There's no rules, but it's still 90 seconds of silence. And then those skills, you take them into place when your child's upset. You just sit there and you don't interrupt and you just let it flow out of them. What I find is, the young adults we see, they never get to figuring out their own problems because somebody's interrupted the thought process, parent, teacher, whoever. But if they can think and talk for longer, sometimes they get to their own resolution. Oh, I shouldn't have stayed up till 4 a.m., whatever it is. So I think that effective listening piece matters. And you think about it, right? Like maybe you need to sit really across from each other and not side by side. Maybe you want to not be standing. You'll figure out the best way to do that listening. That's super effective. And it's just one of the many skills to kind of get people to talk without interruption. And I would say the second piece is you want to figure out a way to make somebody verbally know that you've heard them and get them to continue talking. So that's the other thing with kids. They'll say, I just don't like broccoli, or I just don't like my teacher, right? Conversation shuts down. We do this thing where it looks a little bit like a triangle. We ask, listen, and restate. So I might say, how was your day at school? And they might say, horrible. So what does a parent normally to horrible says, oh my God, tell me everything. But with a listening skill, when a student says, my day was horrible, you say to them, wow, it really sounds like you had a hard day, right? So you're validating their day. Doesn't mean you agree with it. You might think they had the best day on earth, but you're validating that for them, it was a hard day. And then they hear, yeah, you know what, Mom, I really had a terrible day because Johnny was mean to me. And then again, you say, wow, it sounds like that really hurt your feelings. Little bits to get them slowly moving down the road. So I think these are kind of some of the basic skills. Now, you asked a minute ago what you do when there's kind of all out conflict. What do you do?
Yes.
What do you do when it's
conflict
elevated?
When it's unavoidable and everybody's there and you've passed the point of preventing the conflict and you're in it.
So look, it really depends on the relationship. In parenting, and I have 2 teenagers, I have 16 and 19, almost 19-year-old. We do this amazing skill called letting go of the rope, right? So your kid is pulling and pulling and pulling. I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. And sometimes as a parent, you just need to say, you know what? You're 16 years old. I trust you. You decide. Inevitably, when I do that to our son, he says, oh, I really don't want to decide. I want you to decide. So we do a little bit of giving them the power. Now here in a college setting, if there can't be a resolution, sometimes we do this thing, I call it like blue book value. Like when you go to trade your car in and you look in the blue book to get the exact kind of how much does it cost. I might say, what exactly will happen if we don't resolve this? Or I might say, if we can't reach agreement, let's talk about what that would look like. So in college, if you two can't get along and you can't be roommates, what's that going to look like? Oh, wow, I might have to live in my own room. I might get a roommate I don't know at all. That roommate might look pretty good to you now. But that often brings people back to the table. Like, oh, maybe I should work this out because I don't want to move out of my room. I don't want to get there. At home with parents, it's different, right? We put more rules and more rules and more rules. And then that poor kid feels there's so many rules and contracts that we've written, they can't function. The deal with mediation and conflict resolution is we all agree we want things to go well for everyone. So it kind of takes out some of that power dynamic of I'm the dad, you're the kid, it has to be this way. So they feel like they have a little more voice in the process. And they do.
Yeah, because I think really when it comes down to it, and this is such a universal concept, and it's crazy that it's so hard to remember something so simple, but everyone just wants to feel validated. Everyone wants to feel heard. It's one of the most basic human needs that there is. And it's amazing to me how much anger and emotion can be diffused if you can just let the other person know that they're being heard.
Right. And it doesn't mean you agree, but I think as parents, we forget that we were 16 and that we cared what our hair looked like and what the teacher thought of us, or we had more important things to do than, do the dishes. But we all were just that 16-year-old kid. And so to validate, wow, that was super hard. Or there's this other thing that we do called shaping, where it's if they do something that's hard for them and they do it well, sometimes we over-congratulate, right?
Oh, that's interesting.
I noticed that you made your bed. I didn't even ask you. That is so awesome. Where you might think, well, they finally made their bed. Right? But they haven't been. And so you don't have to reward it with a cupcake, but you can really take a moment and say, you know what? You're doing this cool thing. You are getting up without my help every day. You are so growing up. And just extra commenting on the moment, which is super helpful. I went to this yard sale once and saw this plate that was bright red that said, "You are special today." Turns out it's this old, you may have already heard of this, but it's kind of this old way of being. It's called the Red Plate Club or something. And we bought this plate, and instead of giving a gift like, oh, you lost your tooth or you got an A, when you come to dinner, there just is a different colored plate at your setting that kind of shows, hey, you're the special kid today. You did something extra. There's just ways to do it. It doesn't mean there's not going to be conflict, but these are some skills that help get them further along, because when they get to college, we want them to be able to diffuse conflict with their peers. Right now, a lot of parents are talking to coaches, they jump into friend conflicts. As they grow up, we can't do that. How do we get them to resolve these conflicts on their own when they get here? Hey, I don't want you drinking in my room. We're underage. We're going to get in trouble. I don't want you leaving your stinky clothes all over the dorm room floor. Or even telling a teacher they thought something was unfair. How do we get them to do those things?
Right. And let's talk for a moment about the dynamic that occurs when you have a child with special needs or a disability, because I think that's an interesting dynamic. Of course, all parents can have trouble sort of letting go and having their child take the reins. I think when you're raising a child who has a disability, that's even a more intense situation, because you've probably had many years of advocating for your child and giving them the extra support that they definitely needed at the time.
Yes.
But I think that it's extra scary for a parent who's been doing that for so long to really let go and trust that their child is going to be able to figure it out. Right.
Certainly all parents, but definitely parents of students with disabilities, because they've been in that role, and often the student has never spoken for themselves. They weren't at IEP meetings. They didn't have those conversations. And then you're asking them to, even in high school, how do they take ownership and have those very difficult conversations? But I think all of these skills translate across the board. It's really about who has the power, what is the intent of the conversation. And I think the transparency piece is really important, right? If we just let go and let our student take over, they're going to fall down. But saying to them, I want you to learn these skills, right? So I have to let go, but I also need the student to let go of how our dynamic has been. At one point, we were going to talk about when kids are in therapy with their parents. I think the family dynamic, whether or not a young person has a disability, often conflict winds up in therapy. Not a bad thing, but I think a young person often feels that therapy is their parent and therapist working together to fix something in them or to make them change, right? It's really focused on that often. And I think parents often feel like this therapist is aligned with me to resolve the young person's issue. And that dynamic, how can you move forward? Because as we already talked about, conflict comes from being concerned about things in the past. I'm stuck on these past issues. So with mediation,
that's a great way to put it. Yeah,
our goal is to get people who are positioned in the past to figure out what they need today so they can move forward, right? We call it positions, interests, and options. I'm stuck. I'm never going to do that future thing. I'm positional. What do I need so that maybe I can continue having appropriate conversations? So a lot of families are starting to use mediators and facilitators as an alternative to therapy. Maybe it's not a student who's bipolar and needs actual therapeutic strategies, which are really important to get with a therapist. But maybe it's more the family dynamic is so positional on all sides, no one can find common ground, right? And we're the most safe at home with our community of people. It's not giving up your power, but it's how do we find a resolution that works for all of us, right? So you can go to a mediator or a facilitator sometimes as an alternative to therapy. And some cool things about that are that the rules are super different, right? It's still
so?
Well, therapy is confidential, but the cool thing is everyone's agreeing to this process. That's the first and most important part of conflict resolution is that I don't have to be here. I'm choosing to be here. Also, that the person who's facilitating the conversation is completely bias free. And what I mean by that is they have no money in the game. So it's not like one parent is mediating a conversation between the other parent and child. That can't work. You're the parent of one and married to the other. There's inherent bias.
That's messy.
That is very messy. But if you get a neutral person to say, hey, let's talk about the rules. You both want to be here. That's great. We want to get to a place where things are working better. You can step out whenever you want. And if we come up with something that works, we'll put it in writing and everybody can agree to it. And if you want to change it, we all come back together to talk about it. It's not in the middle. Mediation doesn't mean we're finding like I want you to go to bed at 8 and you want to go to bed at 9. And so it's 8:30. It's not about that type of compromise. It's hearing why people are stuck and seeing if you can generate a list of options to move forward. Okay. So let's say you have two parents. One went to Harvard, one went to MIT, and the student wants to go to art school in upstate New York, right? And the parents are saying, this is what's important to me. Everyone in our family went to, I don't know, I'm sitting here in Boston, right? So Boston Ivy League schools. And the kid says, I want to be a sculptor. And no one will get beyond that, right? So maybe you sit with a facilitator who says, you know what? Things are really complicated at home. And everyone says, yep. And you guys are fighting all the time. Yep. So first you agree to the rules. You choose to be here. You want to participate, blah, blah, blah. Everyone's allowed to be mad if they are. And then each person can take time to say, maybe, why is this important? And maybe hear from your child why it isn't important or what else is important. And can there be little pieces that you all feel are important and generate a list that's quite different than what you thought? We find with roommates, you can't believe why the conflicts happen. They fight. And
I can imagine.
I mean, but it's always emotion. It's always emotion that, right? So it's a student will say, I will not live with her anymore because she, ripped my sweater. And you think, oh my God, you're going to move out. Well, it turns out it was my great grandmother's sweater and she died and she was my favorite person in the world. So there's an emotional connection to this little thing that needs to be validated, right? So really all this kid needs to hear is, oh, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. I was irresponsible. Let's do something to commemorate your grandma, right? It's not about the I don't want to live with you. It's about what's underneath, right? So maybe the parents can think, well, maybe I really just want you to get an MBA in art. Can we find something in the middle somewhere? But it seems to be a really effective tool. One big thing that I haven't talked about yet in mediation and in family conflicts at home is that bias piece. Okay. So I think there are conversations that some of us aren't equipped for. We are all not equipped for some conversations, I should say. So if I'm mediating between two students here at my work, one of them is really talking about something that's a hot button for me, I do need to tap out. Even though I'm super neutral, I'm not neutral about that topic. And parents are human. And kids know all your buttons, and they know them ahead of time, and they know how to play them.
And they want to sometimes. They really do want to sometimes, yeah.
Right. So if my son's really mad at me, I'm sure he'll say, like, Grandma was such a better mom than you. Or, they know exactly.
That happens.
Right. They know exactly what to say. And so our job is to say, you're talking about, what's a good example? Your child is talking about their feelings about drug use, but maybe one of your parents used. And that's super sensitive for you. So then you say, I'd like you to talk to your aunt or your other parent for this conflict. And that's teaching them, you know what? I'm human too. I have to step back from this because I'm not good at it, but I'm going to bring you to somebody else who is good at it. And same is true for mediators. Same is true for parents and siblings. And that's full circle back to where we started with, you can't have good resolution when you are emotional, right? Because you're going to get right back to the past. So
right.
Really, really important to have that conversation too. And even when you go to a mediator, when you get there, you might be talking about something and they say, oh, you know what? A good mediator will say, let me give you to my colleague. I've never dealt with GLBTQ issues in kids, or I've never dealt with poverty conversation like this. And they'll bring you to someone else because it's not about us.
Yeah.
And that's the big theme for all of this. As parents, we want our kids to grow into wonderful adults. It's really not about us. It's really about them and the journey they want and how do we support that journey. So it's not really about the broccoli, right? That's the whole thing.
Right. It never is about the broccoli.
Never about the broccoli. But if you feel that your child has only had chicken nuggets for 10 years, it is about vitamins and health, right?
Yes.
So and that's an option. That's a mediated option. What other ways can we get healthy things into your body? And also, why is it bugging me so much? Like, why do I care so much that you're eating SpaghettiOs, right?
Yeah.
You got to be willing to just be human.
Yeah. And you can peel back the layers of something like that and say, well, there's a fear I have as a parent that you are not going to be healthy and well, and that there will be difficulty in your life based on poor health. And this concerns me. So you have to really peel back the layers, I think, to get to the bottom of the situation.
And I will say, you also really take your kid where you find him. You know what I mean? Like, my children are night and day. I have one that I swear does not need me for anything. Ever, right? Yeah. So my conversations with her are very different. And, I have another child who needs more support. So maybe I ask less of him in some areas because I know the other areas he's working on are harder. And so I think if you have 4 children saying you all are exactly the same in terms of responsibility and outcome, that is also a setup for failure. We are all different. I say this funny thing as a manager that at the end of every day, I have to bake a cake, right? And all of my staff are my ingredients. Well, some days I make a really crappy cake, right? Some days I can only get baking soda out of my team. And some days I can bake a wedding cake. But I still have to bake the cake at the end of the day. And it's the same with parenting, right? They still have to get up and go to school. And so maybe it's a chicken nugget day, but you still have to get the whole day done. So you have to figure out what's important and how to, get the best ingredients out of your kids.
Right.
Along the way. And that's all right.
Yeah.
It's all part of the journey. And sometimes in terms of this effective listening piece, you can say, what do you want to do? And they might say, you could say to them, what do you need from me? The 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old, they might not know, or they might say, can you just not talk to me, but be in the room? Like, what they want is okay, and I would respect it. They don't want to be talked at all the time. None of us do. We're like the worst micromanaging bosses, parents. Like, we would never want to work for us.
Oh, definitely.
Right? We would never want to work for us. So, it's sometimes, teenagers are hard. It's okay to come sit in the room that they're in when they're watching Netflix on a show that we think is full of zombies and we might hate, and just sit and watch where they laugh and smile that our kid is laughing. And that's good enough.
Absolutely. I love the way you said, I think that's a great thing that you said about saying to your child, what do you need from me right now? Yeah. If you could just take one thing into any conflict you have in your life, and one thing you can teach your child to do is just to ask the other person,
right?
what can I be for you right now? It's just, it's such a moment of connection.
Or I wish I could
Thank
help.
you for saying that.
Yeah, it's so important. I wish I could help with this. I'm sorry it's hard. Because we are sorry when our kids are in pain and we can't fix it. Right? So we're sorry it's hard. And even if they don't know what they need, the reality is we know them. So it's okay to just sit. It's okay to break our own rules. It's a school night. It's okay to watch whatever you want to watch with them. It's okay to not make the bed sometimes. It doesn't mean you've lost all control. And there are times for rules. I think what I've learned over time here and parenting is, not all of our rules are as important as we think they are unless it's health and safety. A very wise person said to me once, unless a child is actively suicidal, what's the risk in letting them explore if they're not behaving, right? Like, it's okay. It's okay for them to go off and have new experiences, even though they're not doing everything you want. I mean, I don't do everything people want, right? I'm turning 50. We all do different things. But unless they're actively unsafe to themselves or other people, why shouldn't they be out there learning and growing and exploring? And that's not validating the bad stuff. It's saying we want you to learn the good stuff.
Absolutely. Well, Stacey, thank you so much for being here today. This has been such an interesting conversation, and I think you've given all of us so much to think about. This is such an important life skill for everyone to have, and if you do it right, it's one that will follow your kids through their entire lives and make things easier for parents in the process. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Well, we'd love to have you back. If you'd like to learn more about solving challenges from a place of mindfulness and you have a Torchlight account, log in and check out some of our other podcasts as well as our webinars, e-guides, and tools. You can also go to the show notes page to learn more about Stacey. That is it for now. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Torchlight's Exceptional Parenting Podcast. Find this and other episodes on iTunes, Spreaker, and Podcast Go. If you're interested in bringing Torchlight Child or any of Torchlight's other caregiving products to your workplace, please contact info@torchlight.care. That's info@torchlight.care.